Everyone thinks they know their Austen, Colin Firth in a lake, Gwyneth Paltrow playing matchmaker, the Keira Knightley movie if they're under 40. But the real fun is in the adaptations nobody talks about, like Billie Piper playing Fanny Price while admitting she hated the character, or a Pride and Prejudice reimagined as a Mormon rom-com. And then there's the BBC's forgotten 1980 Pride and Prejudice, which some purists insist is better than the so-called definitive 1995. These are some of the lesser-known Jane Austen adaptations worth checking out. Let's start with the 1980 BBC Pride and Prejudice. This is the one everyone forgets about because the 1995 version just steamrolled everything in its path. But this 5-part miniseries, adapted by novelist Fay Weldon, is still one of the most faithful Austen adaptations you'll ever find. Practically all the original dialogue is there. The structure tracks Austen's plot almost beat for beat, and the whole thing is seen through Elizabeth Bennet's eyes. Elizabeth Garvey nails the role, by the way. Weldon tweaked the Bennet parents a bit. Mr. Bennet is a little sharper, Mrs. Bennet less cartoonish. But otherwise, the tone and events stick closer to Austen's novel than pretty much anything else. Even the costumes. Half of them were recycled from the BBC's 1972 Emma, which honestly helps the whole Regency look on a TV budget. Some people say it's stagey or too slow, since it was shot on video with a lot of indoor sets, but the dialogue and period feel have actually aged surprisingly well. At the time, BBC bosses thought they'd done such a solid job, there was almost no point remaking Pride and Prejudice again in the 90s. This is Whit Stillman adapting Jane Austen's Lady Susan, a novella most people never read, into something that's fun, sharp, and just a little bit nasty. Kate Beckinsale plays Lady Susan, the world's most charming manipulator, scheming for marriages, gaming the system, all with that poker-face delivery. Stillman's script takes full advantage of the fact that Lady Susan is told in letters. He gets to invent scenes and dialogue, but it always lands in that sweet spot, honoring Austen's original wit, but just ramping up the comedy. The side characters are gold. Tom Bennett as Sir James Martin is a highlight, and Lady Susan herself gets all the best lines. Some critics say this is actually funnier and sharper than half the classic Austen movies, and they're right. The whole thing plays more like a Regency caper than a romance. Even now stands at 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. Just an all-around critical favorite. Speaking of Kate Beckinsale, she took another swing at Austen in ITV's Emma, with a script by Andrew Davies, who just finished conquering the world with his Pride and Prejudice in 1995. BBC had already tapped a different writer for their own Emma, so Davies took his version to rival network ITV. This Emma trims the novel down to under 2 hours, so it's tight, maybe a little too tight. Beckinsale's Emma is smart, determined, and not quite as sweet as in some other versions. Most of the major story beats are here. Emma's matchmaking disasters with Harriet, Frank Churchill causing confusion, Jane Fairfax's secret, and finally, Emma figuring out she's loved Mr. Knightley the whole time. Critics pointed out the film moves fast, almost no room for those long, introspective scenes. But the Regency details are solid, the script is respectful, and Davies himself admitted Emma is the toughest Austen to adapt. Some Austen fans swear this is one of the better Emmas, especially for staying true to the book, as much as you can in 107 minutes. It gets compared a lot to the Gwyneth Paltrow version, which hit the same year. Some people prefer this one. Sometimes a weird idea just works. From Prada to nada, drops Sense and Sensibility into East L.A., makes the Dashwood sisters Mexican-American, and, honestly, turns the whole thing into a pretty charming rom-com. So you've got Nora and Mary. One's practical, the other's a party girl. Dad dies, the money's gone, and suddenly they're living with their aunt in a very different part of town. The plot loosely follows Austen. There's the sensible sister, the wild one, romantic mix-ups, and a couple of guys who may or may not be trouble. The rom-com vibes take over, and the film only nods at Austen's social satire, but it's got energy. Alexa Vega in particular stands out. She's funny, has good chemistry with the cast. Critics thought it was fluffy, audiences mostly shrugged. But for an Austen update, it's honestly a decent watch. Modern Persuasion does what a lot of Netflix movies only wish they could do. It updates Austen's plot to Right Now Manhattan, keeps the bones of the story, and doesn't try to be more clever than it is. Alicia Witt plays Wren Cosgrove, a 30-something PR exec standing in for Anne Elliot. Years ago, she let her college boyfriend, the Wentworth stand-in, now a tech entrepreneur, get away. And surprise, he comes back into her work life just as she's trying to figure herself out. There's no period drama here. Wren's got a pet cat she talks to, her friends are always shoving her toward dating apps, and the big letter scene from the novel gets swapped for a standard rom-com grand gesture. The core is the same: regret, second chances, learning to go after what you want. But most of Austen's social commentary and subtlety is replaced with breezy comedy. It's easy to watch, but it's not aiming for literary depth. This is Persuasion as a 2020s New York City meet-cute, not as a meditation on heartbreak. If you want absolute loyalty to the book, the 1971 Persuasion delivers. This was a BBC and ITV co-production, 5 episodes, about as close as you can get to just filming the novel word for word. Anne Furbank plays Anne Elliot, quiet, introspective, almost painfully reserved, and Brian Marshall is Captain Wentworth. Because it's 5 episodes, every plot point makes it in. Anne's family losing their estate, the whole move to Bath, all the visits, Louisa Musgrove's accident at Lyme, and the famous letter scene. Scripted almost entirely from Austen's text with a very methodical pace. Sometimes too methodical. Even some hardcore Austen fans admit it can drag, but if you want the details, you get all the details. It was one of the first TV persuasions, and at the time, audiences loved it just for existing. Today, most people see it as a bit dry, a bit slow, but still kind of a gold standard for completeness. Sense and Sensibility takes the modern Austen trend to its logical conclusion. Hallmark style, low budget, barely even nodding at the original story. This one's Sense and Sensibility with sisters named Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood, whose dad gets hauled off for running a Ponzi scheme. Suddenly, they're broke, looking for work, and Marianne's brilliant idea is to make and sell a home-brewed lotion. The basics are all here: the sensible sister, the romantic one, a couple of love interests, and a happy ending. The lotion subplot is a wild detour from Austen, but it gives the movie something to do. There's none of Austen's bite or social satire. What you get is light, family-friendly, romance, the kind of thing you stumble on while channel surfing and keep on in the background. Now, for something totally different, a latter-day comedy is what happens when you take Austen to Provo, Utah, and put everybody in the middle of Mormon dating culture. This indie film recasts Lizzie Bennet as a grad student with no interest in rushing into marriage, her house full of single roommates, and a couple of eligible guys who show up: Bingley, who's super earnest, and Darcy, who's British, rich, and way too uptight at first. The fun is in the details. Collins is a nerdy ex-missionary. Lydia runs off to Vegas instead of London, and the militia is just a bunch of guys prepping for their next mission. There's even a kilt scene during the Vegas wedding rescue, which is a choice. The tone is playful and self-aware, poking fun at both Austen and Mormon traditions. Darcy ends up editing Lizzie's novel, everyone gets paired off, and the movie closes with spoof "Where are they now?" updates. Faithfulness is not the goal. Satire is. This is the ITV movie with Billie Piper as Fanny Price, and it's probably the most controversial Austen adaptation on this list. The basic plot is there. Fanny, poor but principled, gets sent to live with her rich cousins, grows up with Edmund, and deals with the Crawford siblings and their romantic drama. The movie hits all the major beats, but it cuts out a lot. No Portsmouth sequence, so you lose a huge chunk of Fanny's development. The bigger change is Billie Piper's take on Fanny. She plays her as outgoing and confident, almost nothing like the timid, reserved Fanny from the book. Piper herself admitted she just didn't like Fanny Price as written, so she tried to make her more modern and appealing. That choice split fans. Some get it, others think it totally misses the point. The whole film is streamlined and tweaked to be more accessible, but in doing so, it just doesn't feel much like Austen anymore. Last up, the 1987 Northanger Abbey, a classic BBC only in the 80s production. It condenses Austen's novel to about 90 minutes, sticks to the basics. Catherine Morland, a young, bookish girl obsessed with Gothic novels, heads to Bath, meets Henry Tilney, and gets her imagination all twisted up at his family's estate. But the execution is weird. It leans so hard into the satire that it becomes straight-up camp, with over-the-top fantasy sequences and a style that just screams 1980s BBC. The essential Austen irony, using Catherine's wild imagination as a lens for growing up, is there, but the adaptation misses most of the subtlety. Critics at the time called it a mess, and even die-hard Austen fans tend to agree it's more of a curiosity than a classic.